Hey everybody, Nick Buell here. Today we're going to talk about building your frames, accounting for what you need to get them hung on the wall, and yeah, just getting things going finally, right? Get some hands-on, tactile experience here from a construction perspective, anyway. So I'm just going to try to go through this. So this picture I took from the old thread, the discussion thread we had over there. This one and the next picture I'm going to show you, they were put out there by, I'm going to say this wrong. I know I will. Muay Steve, M-U-A-Y Steve. I'll give him credit out on the ABS thread about this, just so credit where credit is due, right? So this was an older image. So this was back when people were making their frames thinner, right? They're trying to make them look like regular poster frames, 1.5 to 2 inches thick. So you can see that here. I mean, this certainly works. It certainly improves your acoustics in your room. Absolutely nothing wrong with this. So I want to put that out there. Now, I, of course, am a fan of using like 1x4 lumber where it's 3.5 inches thick. You get 2 inches of insulation material up front, and you have a 1.5 inch air gap at basically, free boosting performance for the cost of the thicker material. So, but yeah, do what you need to do. If you want to go that route, go for it. Most people are using something a little bit thicker, but again, no fault in what he was doing at this time. We just learned that if you want more performance, you just got to make it a little thicker. So what he's doing here is what he did here many years ago was he did straight cuts, right? And maybe there's a better carpentry term for that. I'm going to call it a straight cut. But I'm not a carpenter, so that just makes sense to me. So he did that where it's just basically 90-degree cuts everywhere, right? And just line it up. It's as simple as it gets. It works perfectly. So I would highly recommend that. People say, well, why don't you do miter cuts? Well, the couple problems with miter cuts. One, when you do it, well, one, you need to have either a miter saw or a miter box. But two, I guess, would be when you go to put them together, you're basically making an angle. And when you take whatever you're going to attach this with, whether it's using clamps or if you're using nails of any kind, screws of any kind, whatever, as you drive that in here, if you have a slope going up this way, as soon as you push on this vertical piece of wood here, it's going to want to go along that slide a little bit, and it's going to move over and up. So it's going to move towards the inside and up on this particular one, or this bottom piece is going to move down and out. And effectively what you're doing is you're messing up all your dimensions. Yes, you can sand off any variance on the outside, and you can ignore the inside because no one's going to see the inside anyway. But now maybe you're in an 1/8 of an inch or a 1/16 of an inch even. I don't look at a 1/16 of an inch. Seriously, Nick, you're worried about 1/16 of an inch? All right, so I get worried about those kinds of things. You might not. I do. 1/8 of an inch, I'm not sure you'd notice it from a distance, but depending on what you're doing for your image, you might have a harder time aligning that corner if it's an 1/8 of an inch short. Or what if you did an 1/8 of an inch short here and an 1/8 of an inch short here on this side, but the top was perfect. Now you're full 1/4 of an inch off on the bottom of your frame or top of your frame or whatever it is, or however that's going to work out. So or you could have it be off on this corner and off on this corner. Now you've got an even different trapezoid to deal with instead of a square or a rectangle. So I would stay away from it if possible. You're going to hide it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Just use these straight cuts. They're super easy. They get a lot of contact material here, especially if you want to glue anything. Yes, you can technically get more contact surface area on a miter cut, but it doesn't matter. If you're using wood glue in there, this is going to be, we're not building the Eiffel Tower here, right? We're just building some frames, so you're good there. Let's say you don't want to glue anything. Well, that's fine too. So you could do something simple like using a finish nailer or a brad nailer, electric or pneumatic. You're using a compressor and just pop, and you just popping these in and you're done real fast. If you want to use bigger nails that you're going to use a hammer with, or if you want to use screws, don't get real chunky ones. Get something that's going to have some length to it. Obviously, you don't want pin needle width either, but something that's going to be not too obtrusive into the wood. And the reason why I say that is the thicker your nail, the bigger your nail, the thicker your screw, the more it's going to split this lumber on the outsides, since we're down so close to the edges, particularly screws. If you think about a screw, it's going to drive in there. Even if you have a pilot hole, it's going to drive in, and that first part's going to be great. But then the top of the screw, when you get above the shaft of the screw, it billows outward or trumpets outward towards the screw head. And that's basically one big wedge. Well, I should say big. It's the size of a screw, right? But it's a wedge that's going in there and trying to rip that wood apart, and it's almost always going to split on you. So I would, yes, you can use screws. I find them very easy to use. but screws and nails that you have to hammer in, pre-drill for one, and then do some sort of countersinking if you can into the wood before you put the screws in, or even the nail heads potentially, depending on how soft your wood is. They might not go in real flat either. And you can use like I said, you go get the little tool that does your countersinking for you. You can use a little bit bigger drill bit. You could even just take the bit out of your drill altogether, if you're using that, and just use that pointed end, closed up. Like if there was a bit in there, but there's no bit, you just close it all the way up, and you use that just to kind of grind your way in, right? I'm not opposed to using a tool in ways that's not meant to be used. As long as it works and doesn't damage the tool, do whatever. But I just caution you on that. My favorite way is using, of course, a nail gun, but I have one. If you don't have one, use what you've got. Just be aware, screws straight into this are going to split that wood. Now, we talked about how this should be a little bit thicker, in my opinion, for the better performance. But if you can't do that, you can't do that. Other things to note, sanding. I would give all of these corners where these joints come together a little bit sanding. Any cuts, like this looks like there might be some tear out in the wood there. I'm not sure what kind of wood this is. It might be pine. Whatever, sand that out. Make it so that nothing's going to snag on your fabric as you're going to go and put this on. I don't necessarily think you need to put a sand on this outer edge necessarily. Now, maybe there's a little divot in here and you want to match that up. That's fine. Usually you want to keep it as crisp as possible on that outside edge, because we do have very distinctive lines that we're doing with our images, between the front image and the border. So, but if you need to put take a piece of sandpaper and just go zip up there real quick on the outside, go for it. If it makes you feel better, if you've got some splintering going on, do it. That's fine. Just don't go nuts making a round over or anything else like that. Don't break out a router if you have one and route the edges. For everything we're doing, that's pretty much not necessary. I did on mine an outside bevel edge because it's decorative, but from a performance building perspective, not needed at all. Only difference there, or only time I'd say you want to do that, is if you're doing something with a light background, like white, or something that doesn't have a lot of print on it. You are going to potentially see this wood frame sticking through that white. You can paint this white if need be, or you could put a bevel on the inside of it so that your fabric is just touching the outside little bit. I know in some of the original posts on the original discussion thread, I think there's like some quarter round or something like that was put on there so it minimized the contact, by basically, then you have to attach that on there, whatever. I would say just go with white paint if you really have to have something that's got a white background. You don't have those issues so much with, actually really at all, with anything that's got printed material. Even maybe printed yellow if it's light or something like that. But again, for most of what we're doing, it's not even an issue. You don't have to worry about it. I shouldn't even mention it probably. But if you do use pine material, it does have the tendency to dry over a long period of time, dry out with all that sap and so forth in it. And then you run the risk where it's going to warp and bend, particularly these taller pieces on the sides. So you might want to take a third piece, like you got one here and one here, for the top and bottom. Take a third piece, put it on its side or lay it on its back or whatever you say. Lay it down so it's flat, not sticking up, but it's laying down flat, and put it in the middle on the back of your frame. That way it gives it room for the insulation to still be there. It's not in the way of anything. You don't have to cut two pieces of insulation or, because you have it sticking up in the middle. Just put it flat. It'll help hold this side and this side from bowing outward. It'll keep things a little more square over time. Also prevent them from kind of twisting. But it is pine. It can do things it wants to do, whether you make best efforts otherwise. So that's some tips on that. Let me go to the next picture. Same guy. This was great. I thought, you can see he used a nail gun. This helps make sure your corner's square. And so we just use a speed square and a couple clamps and just pop, and go a couple nails. Done. Move to the next corner. So fast and efficient this way. But again, if you don't have these tools, don't spend more money than you need to. Now, if you're looking for an excuse to buy power tools, boy, we can get you some just by put these frames together, right? You can get a compressor, an air nailer, you can get a miter saw, a table saw, to make your DIY frames. Actually, you could probably buy some of that material, some of those tools, and still save money over getting commercially made frames with images. But that's for you to debate with your spouse or significant other, how you're going to spend that savings. So I say more subwoofers. No, I'm just kidding. Do whatever you want with it. You don't have to have this. Like I said, since we're doing these straight cuts, it's natural tendency for the wood to want to stay square for the most part. You might get a little bit of variation there, but again, let's keep it simple. You don't have to have this. If you do have these tools, this is awesome, awesome tip. So let's get into how to mount these. My favorite way to do it is using what's called a French cleat. So this image here shows a small French cleat. I don't know how thick this is. This is not a poster panel or acoustical panel that I would ever use. This was just somebody, I don't even know what's inside of this. This came from like a craft site or something, probably, whatever. It just was a great example of how to mount a small French cleat to the back of a frame. So this plywood material here, pretend like that's the back of your installation. And on the other side of that is your fabric, and it's already wrapped around your frame. And this is the back. This is where you're going to mount it to the wall. This is your air gap, whatever. It's not a very big one in this picture, but just pretend that that's what this is. You're looking at the back of your frame. So you're going to take this, which might be, I don't know what this is. This could be a 1x, I'll say it's a 2x4, cut in half maybe, and then cut it at a diagonal. Knowing the square edges, that's probably not what it is, but I'm just saying you could do that. Whatever, use some scrap pieces of lumber, whatever you want to do. Again, we're not picky. I don't want people to get caught up on exact precise things. There's a lot of forgiveness in how you build these things. So just use what you've got. Keep it as simple as possible. Use what you have. The problem with the French cleat is it generally requires like a table saw to make the cuts. So if I want to cut down a 2x4, I've got to rip it the whole length to make it, so it's like this. Was not this big chunky piece of wood at the top. But then you also have to cut an angle. Now this is not 45 degrees. You basically need something 45 degrees or greater. This might be, I don't know, I'm just ballpark guessing here. Maybe that's 55 inches, it's not inches, 55 degrees, maybe 60 degrees, I don't know. You just want some sort of angle on there. What's going to happen is you can see how this is lined up flush with the back of the frame. And this part here, this part is what would mount to your wall. So if you can imagine this being on your wall with the skinny part on your wall, or I should say skinny, the short part on the wall and the tall part sticking in your room, and the absolute opposite on your frame. When this part comes here, it's going to hit this and slide down, which is also pushing it towards your wall. And since it's flush, it will be flush against the back of your wall. I have another picture I'm going to show you here in just a second. It shows how a French cleat works a little bit better. But look at the French cleat. Do not look at what they're mounting. They have it as if the French cleat was on the back of your frame and your frame would be sticking off the wall and whatnot. Ignore that part. We're just talking about the French cleat itself. So you see here, this is, and again, they use a lot of chunky piece of wood here. I don't know if this was a cut 2x6 or I don't know what that is. It's something pretty chunky. But you can see what's going to happen here. When this top part comes down, from the weight of all this, it's going to hit this and slide down, this way, and then back against your wall, and it'll be flush against the wall. So that's what a French cleat's doing. Again, so for us, we're going to do this where it's inside your frame, and it doesn't need to be that bulky as before. And the weight of the poster frame itself, or the artwork frame, the acoustical panel frame, and all the insulation is going to pull that down and towards the wall. Now, a tip here: do not just put screws through this. Even if you pre-drill, don't put it right through your cleat that goes in the wall and right into your drywall, because what's going to happen over time is you're going to inevitably bump your panel or something, and it's going to just slightly move that screw that's in your drywall, and it's going to get loose over time. Once it starts getting loose, it's going to just keep getting loose. Pretty soon you're going to have a panel that's going to be hanging down on the right-hand side by an inch or something like that, and the only way to fix it is to pull it off the wall, drill another hole. I don't think you need to have anything like we don't need to have anything like a toggle bolt anyway. You might want it if you think you are so inclined to do that. These things are not heavy enough to justify having to have toggle bolts in there. Plus the problem with toggle bolts is that you're putting in like a 5/8 inch hole into your drywall, and then you're putting a bolt that's much smaller into that hole. The wings open up inside your drywall, so you gotta make space for that. And then you got a lot of slop in your play. Now, maybe you want that. Maybe you say, well, I'm having a hard time finding two holes that are straight across, and drilling through my my pilot holes into my back of my French cleat here. So I want to have some slop, because then what I can do is I can put that together, and then as I tighten down my bolts on my back of my French cleat, I can get up my little bitty level and set it on top of there and make sure I'm level and so forth. But the problem again with that is you might be level, but you might also be angling downward or a quarter of an inch lower than the next panel over, and you might do a lot more futzing around. But you can do it. Again, I'm not going to say don't do it. Just I don't know if it's the best way to go. I would say use. They have these things out there that look like really fat and short screws that are usually plastic. A lot of times they're white plastic, and you get a box of them for a few bucks. And what happens is you put those and use a screwdriver, and you literally just screw that into your wall right where you want to mount something, and it goes fairly flush. Again, I'm not talking about the ones where you pre-drill a hole and it sticks in your wall and expands when you put a screw through it. These are just, they screw right into your wall, plastic, and in the middle of them, there's a screw hole to put another metal screw through. So that part's similar to other mounting where you put that secondary metal screw through this, but now you're attached relatively securely using an anchoring method that's not going to wiggle on you. Again, we're not holding hundreds of pounds here, so you don't really need anything super robust. So anyway, I've probably talked too much about fasteners already. If you have any questions about anything, pop them into the discussion. We'll talk about fasteners. So the last thing I want to bring up is this. This is one of a few kinds of metal hanging methods that you can go out and buy. If you don't have a table saw and you don't have some way to rip that lumber, then you might want to go this route. Now you notice here that this is just a small, I don't know what this is, maybe it's 6 inches. This is not my picture. That's not my hand or thumb or anything. It might be 6 inches long. You say, well, how can you use a 6-inch thing once you want it all the way across the back? Well, let's go back to our picture here. So this first one here. So if you had, whether it's a French cleat or some sort of hanging mechanism that goes all the way across the back here, and you go to mount it on your wall, you say, oh man, I wish I could move this 1/2 inch. Well, then I got to take it down, move everything over 1/2 inch. Well, let's say that this was 24 inches on the inside, and you made a French cleat or had some sort of mounting that was 18 inches wide in the middle. That still gives you a lot of surface area to make sure that your frame is on the wall very securely, but it also gives you wiggle room, right? You can go a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right without any issues. So I say, you're fine to make it, 18 inch, or if you want to use, some smaller scraps of wood, you can put one on the left, one on the right, as long as they're level with each other, doesn't matter. However you want to do it, just, again, make it work for your needs. But getting back to this metal thing though, this kind of one, you might get away with one of these at 6 inches. It's just gonna be one of those where if you go to move it at all or adjust it at all, you might end up with it, being a little bit tipsy. So I caution against that. And again, these things they're not super expensive, but they're not super cheap either. They're definitely cheaper than having to buy a table saw. But again, if you want an excuse to buy one, whatever. So, but you can use these for sure. The thing with this is that where this person's thumb is, this part here mounts on the wall. And if you notice, it sticks out from the wall. So does the French cleat, no big deal there. This whole part here sticks out this much. Again, that part's not a problem. What the problem is on this top part that goes on your frame, because it's designed, where these screw holes are, to go on this part of your frame. So it's going to add thickness. So it's mounting on your frame, not in your frame, like our French cleat was inside the frame and flush with it. So if you mount this to the back, now you've got, I don't know, we'll say this is a 1/4 inch thick. You have an additional 1/4 inch thickness that is going to push away from the wall. So the top of your frame is going to be a 1/4 inch out. Bottom of your frame is going to hang down and be touching against the wall. It's angled downward. Now that will still work. Performance-wise, that's totally acceptable. Totally cool, no big deal. No one's going to come in and say, why are these angled downward? They're just going to think that, wow, you're super smart. These are, they're not just against the wall. They're angled down for a reason, but no one's going to know. You might know, but they're not going to know. So this really comes down to personal preference on your part. This is your room, your space. You're going to see these things. I hate it when I hang something on the wall, whether it's a mirror or just regular, painting or picture or something like that on the wall, and the mounting mechanism that comes with it doesn't allow me to recess it. Now it's angled downward. I don't like that. I want it to be flush against the wall. For that, same with my acoustical panels. I like them when they're flush to the wall. You might not. You might want this. Hey, I'm totally fine with that. That's cool. This is easy for me. If you do this route and you don't want it to angle downward, you can also get little rubber feet. They're kind of like what you see when you open up your kitchen cabinets. A lot of them will have a little rubber like circle in there, so that when you go and close the cabinet door, it doesn't hit wood on wood. And then you just use something like that. You just find it in the hardware store, usually around the same vicinity as any sort of fasteners and stuff like that. Even though it's not a fastening tool, it's there for like a bumper. But you just find one that's the thickness of these two combined, and you just put them on the bottom. Don't put them right in the corners of your frame. Put them in a little bit, right? Because you're going to fabric there. You're going to have, just cut out a little part, inside a little bit, so you're not seeing this little foot sticking out. So it just looks like your frame is kind of floating a 1/4 inch off the wall. That might look really cool. Maybe you don't like it. I don't know, but at least you can have it straight up and down if you want to. The third option with this is you say, well, I can't rip any wood, but I can certainly add little scraps of wood, is you could actually recess this inside your frame, put it on, put a little piece of wood in here somewhere for that to mount to instead of on the outside. But now you're getting to some, you got to do some math there and figure out how far in to recess it. You got to attach more wood, and you're potentially blocking area where your insulation could be doing some performance by having a piece of wood in there. So just something to think about. Again, I'm not saying it's wrong, and there are other metal ones out there, and there are other ways to attach things to the wall. You could do, if we go back to our picture here, actually maybe I'll do this one right there. You could have metal hooks that go into something on the wall. Like I said, those plastic anchors. You have a little hook where it might be pointed at the top. So when you put this on there, I've actually seen people do this. The hooks are, I don't know where they get them. I could not find a picture of it, but the hook itself has a slight point to it, ever so slight point, so that when you slide this on, it's kind of gripping into this top wood. The wood's pushing down on that point just a hair, but the other end is threaded like a screw, so it goes into your anchors. You could also use regular screws and just put them straight in there and just hang this on the wall. That's probably one of the least secure ways to do it, but super simple, right? You can have a straight screw just hanging out of it, your anchor, and just have this resting on top of the screws. So a couple different ways you can do it. So anyway, that's what I've got. Pretty exciting times. We're getting close, right? Everybody should be thinking about building their frames. Maybe you've got your images already designed and sent off for printing, and you're just waiting on them to ship to you. It's time to assemble everything together, get ready to go. Hopefully you found a place to get your insulation, get that all ready, and get the stuff going. Not only are you going to add some pop and pizzazz to your room, but you're going to also boost your performance of your audio, hopefully very noticeably. I know this is a great experience for me years ago. That's why I'm such an advocate of it, 7 years later. So just keep that in mind, that you got some exciting times coming up. It's well worth the effort. And if you have any questions at all through any of this, or suggestions, I am not the end all be all of information. I'm sure there are people out there that are much smarter than I am, that have other ways to do things, but these definitely work, and they're effective and then proven to work. So open to suggestions, open to knowledge sharing amongst everybody. Please share your questions, comments, ideas. As we go through this, I will, maybe revise some videos down the road as best as I can to make the information stay as current as possible. So again, my disclaimer, I'm not a professional YouTuber. I say and way too much. I know this. These are not necessarily planned out too much in advance. I kind of just wing them as I go, just kind of using what I know and share it with you. But I appreciate you sticking with me through this one. Exciting times for everybody getting these ready to go for your rooms. And again, reach out to me if you have any questions or need any assistance with any images or construction tips along the way. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.